What's going on? It's the Polygon Don, and today I'm back with another 5 underrated games for the PlayStation 3. We got some RPGs, some action-adventure titles, a first-person shooter with a twist, and more. So without delaying any further, let's jump straight in.
We now go live to the KEOC Eye on the City chopper as the convoy leaves town. Police have cordoned off the route between the prison and the courthouse. Live travel updates every 5 minutes on SF News. Just keep us right where we are.
Let's get that beer. Ha-ha! First round's on me. God damn it! Whoa!
In Driver San Francisco, Detective John Tanner, the protagonist from the series' previous 3 entries, is back and accompanied by his partner Tobias Jones. The game starts with the two of them chasing down a convict who has broken free from their police escort. The roles are very quickly reversed, however, as the buddy cop duo realise they've been set up and rather swiftly find themselves at the painful end of a head-on collision. This results in Tanner being comatose and sets up the game's main storyline and major gameplay mechanic. See, the game is pretty much set within the confines of Tanner's mind as he is in a comatose state. Tanner doesn't have a clue about this. From his perspective, he managed to escape the crash and carry on as normal. It's here though that Tanner realises something's amiss. As he is driving, he can hear what sounds like paramedics responding to an emergency. As the paramedics use a defibrillator on the casualty they're tending to, the surge of electricity causes Tanner's inner consciousness to shift, to traverse the astral plane if you will, giving him the ability to inhabit other drivers in the world. With this, he is able to chip away at the case while his physical body is still incapacitated. And that's the main hook of the game. It sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous, but playing it is thoroughly enjoyable. Presented almost like a buddy cop detective show from the 70s and 80s, you have chapters for main missions that progress the story forward, but you'll also have side missions or episodes requiring you to possess, I guess you could say, the bodies of various citizens of San Francisco, either helping out the local police or the resident street racers, etc. Completing these missions grants you willpower, the game's in-game currency. Remember, this is all set in Tanner's head, so actual money is useless. And this so-called willpower is used to purchase vehicles. You might be asking, what's the point if Tanner can just hop into any car he likes anyway? Well, a lot of the side missions rely on Tanner using cars he owns in his garage and not a car the game provides you with. This incentivizes you to collect more cars with varying abilities and quicker speeds so that more of these side missions can be completed. The cars you unlock also start showing up on the street so that they are available for you to shift into when you are completing the main story missions too, providing another positive reason to increase your car fleet. It's all optional, but it does add hours of extra content to an already beefy game. Another cool and optional feature is that throughout the world you can collect movie tokens that, when enough have been collected, 10 I think, this unlocks a movie's car chase sequence for you to play out. Think The Italian Job, Gone in 60 Seconds, etc. It's a really cool added bonus, with probably the best one involving driving 88 miles an hour in a DeLorean. I won't spoil what happens when you do that or show it here, but die-hard fans of the series will get a lot of enjoyment out of that, I'm sure. The driving though is just so good in this game. The bog standard everyday vehicles that Tanner drives to stay incognito as he tails people all feel unique and true to their real world counterparts. You'd think driving a VW Beetle would be a tad boring, but this game manages to make driving literally anything fun. The satisfying crunch you get from collisions or from landing a jump off one of San Fran's many hills never got tiresome, and neither did the numerous frantic car chases that ensued through its narrow alleyways and streets. Pursuing a criminal in a neck-and-neck nail-biting car chase, then shifting into a car from oncoming traffic further up the road just so that you can plough into your target head-on never got old. Delisted from all digital storefronts in 2016, a mere 5 years after its release, and likely due to licensing issues with regards to the cars featured in the game, it was clear Ubisoft didn't value Driver San Francisco enough to draft up and extended licenses, so they took the drastic measure of delisting it everywhere, preventing anyone who didn't already own it from playing this incredible game. Which is mind-boggling from whichever way you look at it, especially when Driver San Francisco is arguably the best the series has been in a very long time. The only legal means you have of playing this game now are to buy the physical copy for the PS3 or Xbox 360, which thank God are still easily found and relatively affordable in the second-hand market, providing another great example of why owning your games physically is still hugely beneficial. Grab this while you still can without breaking the bank, it really is worth it.
You know when you find out the imaginary voices in your head aren't imaginary? You finally wake up and you pay attention. Sometimes it pays to be paranoid.
Released in 2007, The Darkness from Starbreeze Studios is the definition of unconventional shooter. At first glance you think, okay, this is another one of those early PS3 dark brown, hard to distinguish first-person shooters that plagued this generation, but those assumptions swiftly fade away as you realise this is unlike anything that's come out before. Based on a comic book series of the same name, The Darkness sees you take the role of Jackie Estacado, a low-level hitman/errand boy for the New York Mafia, who on the eve of his 21st birthday is targeted for assassination by the mob's big boss, Uncle Paulie Franchetti, with old Uncle Paulie believing that Jackie is after his position as Don of the family. However, as night falls, an ancient demonic force that has inhabited Jackie's bloodline for generations, known as the Darkness, violently manifests itself and massacres his pursuers, with the Darkness itself being voiced by none other than Mike Patton, the lead vocalist from Faith No More. With Jackie's newfound powers and his growing desire for revenge, he sets out to destroy Uncle Paulie by gradually dismantling his drug and money laundering operations. As Jackie works his way through the mob's ranks, he annihilates his foes with traditional FPS shooting and weaponry, as well as his newfound demonic besties that have a weakness for light but an insatiable appetite for human hearts. Eating the hearts of the vanquished also grants you the ability to level up your darkness abilities. Soon enough you'll even be able to summon additional underlings from the netherworld to aid you in your quest for revenge. Other abilities include black holes that suck up anyone caught in its pull and immobilizing them. However, these abilities are limited, maybe unsurprisingly, to areas that are dimly lit, meaning that if you're ambushed by a bunch of goons and want to use your powers, you'll need to shoot out ceiling lights or street lamps first in order to do so. It's the kind of thing that you think is cool in the first few instances, but does become a little tedious as the game goes on. Although its world looks kinda bare bones, there's actually a surprising amount of detail in this game. You'll be walking around New York through its alleyways and main streets, and also use its subway stations to move further around town. And through all of this, you can pretty much interact with anyone you come across. Some have more interesting things to say than others, but all of them are well acted in a kind of cheesy B-movie fashion that I really enjoyed. The story overall was great, the pace of it kept it engaging throughout, and the characters and acting talent that backed them made you genuinely care in a way that most other FPS shooters of the time tried but ultimately failed. Considering its comic book origins, it feels more like it's based on an organised crime movie from the 90s. That is until the game closes in on its final act where it descends into something else entirely, but I won't be spoiling that here. If like me you need your first person shooters packing additional ideas and mechanics to keep it interesting, then The Darkness is definitely something you should prioritise seeking out if you haven't already. A little rough around the edges, yes, but the ideas and execution of those ideas, coupled with a genuinely engrossing story, still make it feel fresh even by today's standards. And shout out to one of the best Easter eggs I've ever come across in a game. There's a scene relatively early on where Jackie is at his girlfriend's apartment and you get the option to cozy up on the couch together. She turns on the TV and an old black and white film starts playing. Only this isn't some stock footage on a loop. What plays is the classic 1962 adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird. in its entirety, all 2+ hours of it. You can literally sit there and watch the whole film along with Jackie and his girlfriend like some sort of creepy invisible third wheel. Brilliant stuff.
I had my first kiss down here. I was 15. Some hooker named Candy. She crossed her legs and broke my sunglasses. Good times.
I'm ready for you, so bring it. Jeez, get off of me, will ya? You're always on my back, one way or the other. Ew, that was so gross. Hello, this is Agent Maximiel. Yes, sir.
Neverdead, released in 2012 by UK studio Rebellion and published by Japanese industry giant Konami, is a very strange game. This East meets West collaboration of development is mirrored in-game with its shooting and hack-and-slash mechanics, and its main premise being the dismemberment of the immortal protagonist you'll be playing as, Bryce Boltzmann. As Bryce, a 500-year-old immortal now working as a demon hunter for hire in the modern day, you'll be shooting and slashing through your enemies as you fight your way to the game's main antagonist, the Demon King Azeroth, the same Demon King that made Bryce immortal half a millennium ago. After 500 years of misery, Bryce has somewhat lost his zeal and now begrudgingly works alongside private investigator Arcadia Maximiel, as they track down and eliminate any demons that have crossed into our plane of existence. The game is broken down into 10 levels, and each of them are presented in a linear fashion, mostly consisting of wave-based enemy encounters as you work your way through a fixed route. Its mix of guns, swords, explosives and destructible environments means there's plenty of carnage to be had here, especially given the fact that you're immortal. As Bryce takes damage, this is reflected via limb dismemberment. He might lose a leg, for example, which will force him to hop around until he finds it and commando rolls into it, which somehow miraculously reattaches itself. Or it might be an arm, which will prevent him from either swinging his sword or raising his gun, depending on the arm lost. Take an explosion to the face? No problem, only now all your limbs and torso are scattered around the place and you're just a rolling head, forcing you to re-Frankenstein your body in order to continue the fight. This mechanic and main hook of the gameplay loop also provides opportunities for environmental puzzle solving and exploration. You can also repeat levels to grind XP, enabling Bryce to have even more abilities. But I do have to quickly mention that accompanying the strangeness of the game are some even stranger design choices with regards to button mapping. Using your sword during melee combat, for example, can make the combat experience feel cumbersome and messy, due to the fact that instigating a swing of your sword is done with the right analog stick and not a face button. While it's not a huge deal, it did bug me on a few of the more frantic occasions as it just didn't feel that responsive. This game definitely has its faults and it's not going to be for everyone. Its jokes are juvenile, its story is predictable and the gameplay is janky as but I still had a great time with this. For me, if a game is trying something new but ultimately falls a little short, 9 times out of 10 I'll give it a lot more leeway in terms of critique. Plus the combo of Rebellion and Konami teaming up on this alone was enough for me to investigate further, and ultimately I'm glad I did. Is this a good game? Yeah, I think so, sort of, but at the same time I wouldn't recommend everyone with a PS3 go out and grab a copy either. If, like me, you can quite happily put up with a certain degree of unpolishedness for the sake of novel and weird ideas, then definitely pick this up the next time you see it. I personally played through this on my own, but I can totally see this being an unintentionally hilarious couch co-op game. Sink a few beers, pass the control each time you die kind of thing, and just have a laugh, embracing the jank, man.
You owe me one, right? Strange seeing you here. What's up, Alex?
So, where's your new partner?
Tough break. He was hit by a stray knife I threw.
purely unintentional, you know.
You killed another partner?
Accidents happen. No big deal, right? Isn't that the third one? Well, I've always been sort of a lone wolf anyway. So, catch you later, alright?
The Mount Baron estate burned, and with it my dream of a reborn 10th Legion. Or so I thought. I did not know that you and Martin Guiscard had escaped the destruction. As you fled into the night, you bore with you the future of the Legion. Pursued by enemies, fleeing toward an uncertain fate, you made your way across the empty leagues of the Rukenval.
Dungeon Siege 3 is an action RPG by Obsidian Entertainment and released hot on the heels of the studio's prior game Fallout New Vegas in 2011. Unfortunately, it didn't quite garner the same love and adoration that New Vegas got and was pretty much ignored by almost everybody, and those that didn't ignore it weren't exactly enamoured with what they found, which for reasons we'll get into shortly I think is a bit of a shame. Being the third mainline entry in the series, fans of the originals weren't very pleased with the changes Obsidian made to the formula. Mainly the fact that in Dungeon Siege 3's single player mode, only one of the AI controlled NPCs can accompany the player at any given time. Even though that active companion can be swapped out for another whenever you choose, this contrasts drastically to what fans were used to from the previous entries where multiple characters could be present in the game at the same time. However, going in with no pre-existing knowledge of the series like myself, you likely won't find that to be an issue. What you will find is a fairly decent top-down action-adventure RPG with it leaning slightly more on the adventure side than the RPG side of things, as was quite common in games of this genre from that time period. It has a brilliant medieval fantasy setting with rich and diverse environments to traverse through as well as challenging and rewarding dungeons to explore. Its art style is also worthy of praise with its mix of realism and high fantasy animation resulting in a unique look and feel. Its bleak and drab medieval world is regularly elevated with bursts of neon from magic wielders and the contrast is very effective. Story-wise, things here pick up 150 years after the events of the previous entries. Now, depending on which of the four starting characters you choose will subtly affect the critical path of the main narrative, however you will meet the ones you didn't pick as they are crucial to the story and act as the AI-controlled companions that will accompany you. A few decades before the events of this game, the 10th Legion, a military force that provided stability in the region for nearly 400 years, attempts to remove the current king and replace him with his son. However, the mission goes awry and the son was slain in the process. The king's illegitimate daughter Cassinda then rallies the people and the church against the Legion, and after a brutal war she manages to kill most of them. The king and his family challenged Cassinda but were killed save for his daughter Roslyn, his legitimate heir. Roslyn, along with the remnants of her army, flee into the mines for safety, and a small group of legionnaires remained, led by a man calling himself the Venerable Odo, a former Legion spy. He kept descendants of the Legion safe from Cassinda and at the beginning of the game calls on them to meet in order to re-establish and regroup the Legion, getting the band back together basically, and this is pretty much the plot's main driving force moving forward. And while it is a little cliched and rote, gathering information on the whereabouts of your lost Legionnaires and tracking them down provides enough direction to keep things moving. The dialogue and the characters themselves, whether main or side characters, were all relatively well executed, even if they don't hit the same heights as some of Obsidian's previous games. You will also have dialogue trees when conversing, so you get more of a sense of control with that too, even if a lot of the time your choices seem to funnel down to the same path anyway. With each of the four player characters controlling and playing differently, it's your choice whether you prefer to get up close and personal with a melee build, or play it cool from a distance with a ranged character, for example. Each of the playstyles vary enough to hopefully provide something for everyone. Whichever you choose, each are able to equip 2 different weapon types, 3 active abilities for these weapons, and even some special attacks. There's goodies to loot and weapons and armor to equip that come with stats of their own, but it's quite simplistic and easy going. You can't do crazy builds, for example, but you can at least kit out your party members yourself, which is always nice. Like I said, not too heavy on the RPG mechanics, this is definitely more focused on action and adventure. Boss fights are decent enough too, most of the time, although they're certainly not the game's highlights. Some of them just ramped up the difficulty massively and provided way too much of a challenge that in my opinion was just down to bad design or even laziness. For example, some of them were just the harder enemies that you come across in the world or a dungeon, only with an obscenely larger health bar. Never been a fan of that. It is rough around the edges, and considering the pedigree of the talent that made the game, it probably should have been a bit better. But should it be ignored completely or even hated on as much as it was? No, I don't think so. If you're into your top-down action RPGs and aren't emotionally attached to what the series was prior, you should definitely give this game a go. At the right price, I think this is still well worth adding to your collection.
I need to find another way of getting you across. Wait here.
You're leaving me alone here? How do I know you're coming back?
You die, I die, right?
Yeah.
So I'm coming back.
The third game from now acclaimed developers Ninja Theory, Enslaved Odyssey to the West is a narrative-driven third-person action-adventure with a sizable list of Hollywood talent attached to it. Written by film director and author Alex Garland, with Andy Serkis providing the voiceover and motion capture of its main protagonist Monkey, it's loosely based on the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West. However, Enslaved reimagines its setting as a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by a global war and set 150 years into the future. Much like in The Last of Us, for example, nature has taken over, slowly erasing the evidence of the industrial world it left behind, as vines and all sorts of lush greenery blanket the concrete and steel that once was. It really is stunning to look at throughout its roughly 10-hour campaign as you jump, swing and climb your way through this gorgeously realised world. You'll play as Monkey as he awakens aboard a slave ship frantically trying to set himself free. However, his eventual escape inadvertently causes the vessel to crash, and it's here he finds a young girl named Trip using an escape pod to distance herself from the falling behemoth. Begging her to let him in, she refuses and they plunge to Earth with Monkey holding on for dear life. After making it back down to solid ground and regaining consciousness, Monkey discovers Trip has placed a slave headband on him, forcing him to follow her orders. A termination trigger is also in effect, meaning that should she die, he would too. She wants to return to her village and needs Monkey to accompany her. Reluctant, but with little choice in the matter, Monkey agrees and thus begins one of the most underrated double acts in gaming. I'm not going to go into any more plot details here, but I will say that the way these two characters develop over the course of their journey is just fantastic. They're so believable because of the outstanding character performances and the work Garland did with the script. It just feels like it all came together beautifully. Even the music in the game is fantastic, with Nitin Sawhney providing the score. While traversal can feel a little like Prince of Persia or even Uncharted, combat takes on a more fluid melee martial arts style more reminiscent of something like Castlevania Lords of Shadow or even the early God of War games, albeit with slightly less complexity. Primarily you'll be fighting mechs, as they are all that are left pretty much, and even after all these years that have passed since the war, follow their initial programming to seek and destroy any organic life. You'll be taking them down using light and heavy attacks with your trusty staff, which also doubles up as a ranged weapon, blasting or stunning foes depending on the ammo used. Another ability of Monkey's, and one of my favourites, was the cloud device, which manifests as a small cloud for Monkey to use as a hoverboard, allowing you to glide across land and water at high speeds. It just worked really well and switched up the exploration and environmental puzzles at just the right time. Overall, the combat and upgrade paths can feel a little lacking in terms of depth and choice, but with the sheer variety of objectives you are given as the player, coupled with an incredibly well written story that's masterfully brought to life by the actors, it more than makes up for any shortcomings the combat system has. Reviewing well, this was still considered to be a commercial failure, as it just didn't sell the numbers Bandai Namco, the game's publisher, was hoping for. I'd love nothing more than to see this series come back, but I'm not holding my breath. Also, heads up for any die-hard fans out there, here in the UK we received a retail exclusive version of the game from the store HMV titled the Talent Pack. This included the game, obviously, but also the soundtrack by Nitin Sawhney on CD, as well as a copy of Alex Garland's novel The Tesseract, and all presented in an exclusive box. It's pretty nice and something you really don't see crop up on eBay all that much anymore, so definitely keep an eye out for it if you're interested. Either way, the game's incredible and should definitely be added to your collection if you haven't done so already. And there you have it, people, another 5 great PS3 games to consider for your collection that usually fly under most people's radars. Let me know down in the comments if these are games you've played or are now thinking of playing, and if you're new to the channel, have a think about subscribing and hitting the like button, as it genuinely helps out quite a bit. Next up will probably be some PS4 content, so keep an eye out for that if that sounds like something you might be interested in. But for now though, I'm out. Take care, be good, and game on.